Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Triple Option Podcast. I'm your host, Abhi Nigari, joined by Nate Audrey and Tarun. Today, we'll be recapping the Texas ULM game, headed by our co host, Tarun. Take the floor.
How do you as y'all can see, Texas is clearly back as we beat the best team in Louisiana. Y'all cannot say they aren't the best in Louisiana because all the Louisiana teams I'm pretty sure lost this week. In all seriousness, Texas will have a fairly easy victory as most opening games are. Quinn Ewers had a bit of a rough start at the beginning but got going and the offense fairly good. We just can see how this game translates into next week against Alabama. Let's go into some more offensive side of the game and see how both teams did. So as I was talking about before, one key hopeful piece for Texas this year would be former five-star tight end Tavion Sanders. He's a great athlete out of Allen High School, and while last year didn't have much of an impact due to mostly confusion on whether he play on defense or offense, this year they settled him in as a tight end, and it's clearly paid off. While again this is more of a cupcake game, Tavion Sanders had 6 receptions, 85 yards, as well as a receiving touchdown. And there seems to be a good connection forming between Quinn Ewers and Jatavion Sanders, similar to what formed between Xavier Worthy and Casey Thompson last year. So again, it should be hopeful for things to come. Obviously, not trying to overreact here, even though we clearly are back as a program. ULM, not much success. Jevin Frett was the most successful receiver with 4 receptions and 61 yards, 15.3 yards per catch. However, while I did think that Chandler Rogers would be key to this game, he didn't perform well. Um, Again, this was expected as a Texas blowout, but I'd say that was most of the offensive. Are there any
Um, I,
questions you might have?
yeah, I do have a question. How do you feel about Xavier Worthy's performance in this game? I know last year he was a big star for you guys, but in this game he only had 2 receptions, 24 yards, and he seemed to struggle to get the ball. He had a couple drops. How do you feel?
I'm not too worried about Xavier Worthy because I didn't expect him to have like a Blutnikoff level year. I was a bit thrown off the fact that he did struggle a bit. However, I think there are multiple reasons for this. One, one Casey Thompson last year was much more of a gunslinger of a quarterback who's willing to throw it deep. At least that's what the game plan was, and that just fits Xavier Worthy's style more. And I think the plays that Xavier Worthy typically does succeed in the short game, such as there are a couple of wide out passes to players like Kane that typically would have gone to Worthy. I think the reason for this is Sarkisian was trying to preserve his star players for the big game next week. The drops are a bit concerning, but I think they end up just getting used to different throwing stuff from Quinn Ewers and from Casey Thompson and Hudson Card. But I'm not too worried about Worthy's production.
Okay, I have another question. How do you feel about Quinn Ewers winning the start? I mean, obviously he was announced in fall camp, but how do you feel about his performance? And how do you feel that Hudson Card did end up getting about a drive at
I'm
the end of
not.
the game?
Yeah. So I think Quinn Ewers did okay. The only reason I say okay is I try not to put too much emphasis on QB introductions during cupcake games. We kind of fell that trap last year with Hudson Card. Hudson Card, as he played very well against another Louisiana team, that being the Rage Cajuns, but then the Arkansas game the next week kind of folded his career. So I'm not trying to overreact too much to this game. I think it's a good thing to get some of the rust off because obviously he hasn't played in a real football environment in quite some time. Um, I think it's good. I thought what Sarkisian would initially do is I thought he would start Hudson Card and assume that the Bama game wasn't going to go well, throw Card to the Wolves, and then um start Ewers. But I think it's good that he's showing Ewers that he has the confidence in him. He threw an interception on his second play of his Texas career, stayed with them, and ended up producing in the end. So I think it's good that Sarkisian is striking a balance between like obviously making sure Ewers isn't injured by putting Card in, but also showing Ewers that he has confidence in him. So I guess that's my over exaggerated answer to that question.
You want to move on to defense now?
Yeah, for sure.
Sounds good.
So obviously last year Texas the defense wasn't there. We lost. We were good for some stretches, then we lost stamina, and it just kicked our ass. This game, this game, defense is going to be a big factor, and what we did hold ULM defense points. Come on, it's ULM versus Texas. Texas simply wins because of the athletes. However, there were some good signs in this game, specifically from DeMarcus Overshawn, or known as Demo by Texas fans. So DeMarcus Overshawn had a very solid game. 6 solo tackles and 2 tackles for losses, which included 2 tackles for loss. So the reason I emphasize this, the sideline doesn't look amazing, but looking at the game itself, Marvin O'Shawn definitely did a good job leading defense from his linebacker position, and he just better to playing linebacker position itself. Because for those of you that don't know, he was recruited to play safety in high school, and I believe he entered this offseason around 220 pounds, which is very light for a linebacker, right? I believe he got up to around 230, 235. So seeing him adjust to his bigger body and still playing with the same level of efficiency was very good to see. Again, ULM didn't do much. Tristan Triggers had 3 tackles, 2 of which were solo, and I'd say the only real highlight was intercepting Manures on, I believe, the 3rd play of the game, the second passing play of the game as well. And again, looking at that play, what effectively happened is Quinn Ewers was rushed, rolled left to the right, and he tried to make a play he would make back at South Lake Carroll where he played high school ball. And I think that was a learning experience for him where he can't make those high school throws anymore at college level. So I think, again, most of ULM's defensive victories were based off of Texas basically ironing out some kinks more than anything else. So I think that'd be a good summary for the defense. But
Yeah.
obviously, as everyone knows, this isn't too representative of what could happen in the future. So
Yeah.
any
So
questions y'all have?
how'd you feel about your pass rush this game? Obviously, you had 8 tackles for loss and 3 sacks in a game. Obviously, there's a talent gap between ULM and the rest of the Big 12 schedule you'll be playing on later in the season. But how do you feel about those numbers right now?
I'm not optimistic or pessimistic. I expected it, but I don't think it's an indicator for what could happen in later games. I think the problem last year is we just weren't physical enough on the line of scrimmage. The guys that were being willing to be physical were underclassmen and just hadn't built up the size yet. And the guys that weren't being physical were the guys who had the size to begin with. So I think we can't really make a diagnosis off that to begin with. This game didn't really show much about the defense at all, so I really wouldn't make many future predictions on Texas performance defensively based on this performance alone. I think Alabama will be much better test to see how the defense goes.
Yeah. So one more question just about this previous game before we talk about next week. I'm curious if there were any newcomers, whether that be transfers or freshmen, or even like redshirts that you haven't seen in previous years that you were impressed by in this game.
Uh, I'd say I'd say probably Kelvin Banks. We started a freshman at the left tackle position, which is obviously a fairly risky move given that this more often it's considered to quote the blind side, the movie. It's very much the most valuable position on the offensive line, assuming your quarterback's right-handed, because you're protecting your blind side, right? And so I think it's a very risky move to start him at left tackle, even against a team like ULM, because you don't want to get hurt. Right? He didn't play perfect. His footwork was a bit iffy at times, but again, as a freshman at that size, he's already had 300 pounds. It's expected. He performed well. Be interested to see. I don't know if they should start him against Alabama, just because I feel like that could shake a lot of the freshman's confidence. But it was good to see him play well. Um, I'd say that's the main one on the offensive side.
Nice. That's crazy that you guys are starting a freshman at such a critical position on the offensive line.
That's how bad it was last year because statistically, we've averaged only 2 recruited offensive linemen for the 6, 7 years before Sarkisian came, which
Oh
is,
my gosh.
but in last year alone we had 7. So it's going to be a big transition year on the line. So
hmm So obviously we're recording here on Sunday, the day after, and it has been announced that College Game Day will in fact be making the trip down to Austin for College Game Day. And of course, the game is already scheduled to be the big noon game of the week at 12 p.m. How are you feeling about the hype playing against number 1 Alabama coming to town?
I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of scared. Like,
What?
don't get me wrong,
Why
we're
would you? Why
clearly
would you be
bad, but
scared? Why would you be scared?
Kind
I mean,
of.
What
we're
is there to be
clearly
scared
bad. I
of?
mean, I just don't know if we're Alabama back here. No, but in all seriousness, I think that it'll be a struggle, definitely, but I think I'm trying to think how to like rephrase that. We're gonna get our asses kicked, but okay. In all seriousness, I think we can put up a good fight. I don't expect us to win, in all honesty, but I think if we can show that we have the moxie to stay in the game, will be very critical. In a lot of games last year, especially, like we were in the Arkansas game for a lot long stretch. We just mentally quit. We were in basically every game last year that we lost, and but we mentally quit. Like there's no Kansas loss this year if we were mentally a strong team.
Mhm.
Right? And I think Bama's a game that can either prove, build, or destroy the mental moxie of the team. I think that's why Sarkisian has to approach it by starting certain players, not necessarily for the success in the game solely, but for the success of the season. I know the typical coach's mantra of one game at a time, but in reality, football's a game of stats and it's a game of emotions at its core.
Yeah,
So that's my feeling on that Texas Alabama game.
I will just say, as my from experience as like an Ole Miss fan, having to play Alabama every year in the SEC West, it's important that Texas. I'm already in the mindset. I've watched Alabama play for several years. I'm in the mindset that Texas isn't gonna have that successful of an outing next Saturday against Alabama, and you guys might get knocked down a peg or two. And it's important that the week after you don't let Alabama beat you 2 weeks in a row, because that can happen
Yeah.
so easily, especially with all the talent and their relentlessness when they play.
Then we let last year we let Oklahoma beat us 10 weeks or like 7 weeks in a row, which is
Yeah, yeah. I don't
like
know if Kansas really should have happened.
I mean it shouldn't have. You know, I'd say that's a good summary on the best program in the history of college football. So let's move to closing and call it a night, boys.
Yeah. So thanks for watching another episode of the Triple Option Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. I'm your host, Nate Autry, along here again with Abhi Dingery and Turduglu. And again, you can check our channel to see any other content covering college football. We do recaps, previews, and we also have some videos over NFL and USFL. So be sure to check that out if you sound interested. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.